today we are so lucky to have a very strong team here, for this opening. Yeah, we have Josh to talk about AI, to have enabling AI. We have, three or four, panelists from different places. Ted from Arizona, 5 a.m. in the morning. We have Josie from EPFLS Switzerland. We have Andrew was from Imperial College, UK. We have Hui Chan was my neighborhood. Yeah, actually Tsinghua University. So yeah, it's a very qualified stage. It will be a big, strong panels. Looking forward to that. So as usual, first we will have Josh to deliver the talk. So Josh, when you prepare your slides, let me very briefly introduce Josh. So I met Josh was last year on this stage. So Josh was a panelist to join talk was for the liquid metal. So that time we're talking about all these robots issues. So Josh was a very, very great panelist, I think about why not we talk about, how to empowering or enabling all the intelligence with robots. So that's why we have this talk, and it's right on time, because this year we all know that Sarah was, be the big topic and the big issues worldwide. Everyone was talking about the artificial intelligence is already here. So it's already here. It's waiting for us. So what we can do and how we, can involve enabling all this intelligence into the robots. So Josh today's talk is right about this. And he's a winner of the national award, from the President Obama in 2011. He's also, a very famous scientist, with many, many ideas. And he's a super writer. I think I write a public book about this was 18 years ago. He was very kind of, how to say, strong speakers, because he was on the talk show, right? The Freeman's talk show. So all these things make us really looking forward to Josh's talk. So Josh, yeah, the stage is yours, please.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me here, and thanks to all of you for showing up. And as Alice mentioned, I'm going to speak today about the intersection between AI and robotics. So I consider myself a roboticist, but I don't work directly on robots. What we do in my lab is try and develop AI that, instead of generating prompts and images, is able to generate or design robots for us. So I'm going to walk you through some of our work today, where in all of these three parts of this talk, you're going to see AI designing robots for us. And these three sections are arranged in time chronologically because I see a trend occurring in robotics where we're gradually moving away from, so to speak, traditional rigid robots like the one that you see here into the space of soft robotics. So I'll talk about rigid robots first, and then soft robots. And then finally, in more recent years, there's been a intersection between AI, robotics, and synthetic biology. And that's led to the creation of biological robots. And these are biological machines that are built from biological rather than technological components. So I'll talk about rigid, then soft, then biological robots. But before we talk about these three technologies, I think it's worthwhile to just take a step back and talk about why we might want to create robotics. We're in the middle of the AI revolution, and we're learning about how AI can be useful and potentially dangerous if used inappropriately. So I think it's worthwhile, while robots are not quite mainstream yet, but they're coming, to think about some of these issues. So I use this slide to motivate our thoughts about why we might want to create robots in the first place. So starting in the upper left, over 100 years ago, Henry Ford came up with a way to systematize the way that we build things indoors. And that was the invention in the 19th century of mass production. which systematized the way we build things indoors. And then many, many years later, in the 1960s and the 1970s, as you can see in the upper right panel, industrial robots started to appear, and industrial robots automated the way that we build things indoors. So if you put these two innovations together, mass production and industrial robots, that led to an incredible revolution in the 20th century about how we build things indoors. It allows us to build very, very large numbers of complex machines like motorcycles, cars, iPhones, you name it. By scaling up the way we produce things indoors, we've been able to make things much more cost effective and made these technologies available to very large numbers of people. So if industrial robots have been so useful indoors, it would follow that autonomous robots that are able to autonomously decide what to do in outdoor environments would be similarly useful. So if you look at the bottom pair of images, you can see that the way that we build things out of doors, like buildings, for example, has not yet benefited from the robot revolution. We don't yet have very large numbers of robots operating in outdoor environments. If we could, that would again revolutionize the way that we build things outdoors, bring down the cost of construction and maintenance of infrastructure, and allow us to build very large numbers of things outdoors, like buildings and roads and bridges, solar farms, wind farms, wave farms. And in the long run, in my view, that could make a significant dent in some of the global challenges we're facing, like climate change and energy issues where we're trying to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. So that's sort of the big picture, long-term view I have for why I think autonomous robots would be important. The challenge, as I've already mentioned, is it's very difficult to create autonomous robots and deploy them in outdoor environments for a reason that was pointed out over 2,000 years ago by the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. Heraclitus was purported to have said, "Man never enters the same river twice." What did Heraclitus mean by that? What he meant is that any humans or anyone or anything that operates outside is continuously bombarded by new experiences. Even a familiar river that you swim in, every time you enter that river, it's completely different. If you look at the actual pattern of photons falling on your eyes, the sensation of the flowing water around your body, at any instant of time, what you feel is very different from what you felt in the previous instant and at any other time. So when we deploy robots in outdoor environments, they're immediately washed in continuous diversity and new situations. And we don't yet know how to create machines that can grapple with that continuous change. Industrial robots that work in factories are designed exactly to make sure that industrial robots experience exactly the same thing over and over again. So I've dedicated my professional life to trying to create autonomous machines that can deal with that diversity. And I invited some of my colleagues here today, Josie and Antoine and Ted, who similarly work on some of these hard problems. So in the remainder of my talk, I'm going to invite you all into this challenge and why this is so difficult, and introduce you to some of the ideas we as a community have come up with to combating those challenges. So I'll show you just this slide before we dive into some particular projects. This sort of gives you an overview of the work that I and my colleagues have done with robots over the last 25 years or so. And you can sort of read this slide by starting in the upper left, where we've got some traditional rigid robots you see in the top row of this panel. And as we move into the middle of the slide and the middle right of the slide and down in the lower left, in more recent years, myself and my colleagues that are here today are doing interesting work in soft robotics. And if you focus now on the bottom center of this slide, you can see some biological robots. These are now known in the popular media as xenobots, Xeno, xeno, and bots as in robots. In all of these different projects, my group has always applied.
Hey, Josh, I couldn't
Yes.
see your screen. Yeah.
Oh, you can't see my screen. Oh,
Yes.
okay. Let me try that again. Can you see my screen now?
Yes,
Ah, okay. How's that? Can
now
you see my
works.
screen
Yeah,
now? Oh,
yeah,
okay. All
works.
right. I'm sorry, everyone. Let me start over with this slide. So what you're now seeing is a snapshot of several projects my colleagues and I have worked on in robotics over the last 25 years. If you look at the top left and the top center of the screen, you can see some rigid robots that we've designed over the years, and I'll talk about that rigid robot in the top center in a moment. In the last 5, 6, 7 years, like many of my roboticist colleagues, we've moved into the space of soft robotics, and you can see some examples of soft robots in the middle and the middle right of the screen and the lower left of the screen. And then more recently, in the last few years, as you can see in the bottom center of the screen, we've started to design and deploy biological robots, robots made from biological rather than technological components. Although these are all very different robots made from very different materials, my lab applies more or less the same approach to designing and training these robots, which is to evolve them in virtual worlds. And you can see for each of these robots, its virtual world on the left. And we use an evolutionary algorithm, which I'll talk about in a moment, which tries out millions and millions of different ways of controlling the robot, or millions and millions of different ways of designing the body of the robot. And once that evolutionary process becomes confident that it's evolved or designed a useful robot in simulation, we take that robot design and manufacture it in reality, and sometimes the real robot does what evolution thought it would do in simulation. So this is known as the evolutionary robotics approach, where we evolve robots rather than train them with machine learning. Okay, so let's talk about the first robot that I mentioned. This is a project that I conducted while I was a postdoc with Hod Lipson at Cornell University here in the US, and our colleague Viktor Zykov. In this project, this was a project funded by NASA. NASA was interested in or concerned with what would happen if something happened to the robot when it was deployed on the surface of a planetary body. What if something truly outside the experience of the robot occurs, like, for example, that it suffers an injury? You can see in the bottom video that this robot has lost the bottom part of its leg. How does a machine, first of all, discover or detect that something has gone wrong? And then how does it autonomously discover a way to compensate or recover from that unexpected injury? And in this project, and I'm going to walk you through some of the details of this project in a moment, here you can see that this robot has recovered its ability to walk from the left side to the right side of the table despite this injury. In the case of a rigid robot, it only has one option available to it, which is to change the way that it moves. So let's have a look at that. The first thing this robot does is it more or less acts like a human baby. It has very little information about its own body. It's not clear to the robot what it can and can't achieve in the real world. So this robot starts by dreaming or thinking up all the different ways that its body parts might be put together. The first challenge for this robot is to construct what's known as a body image or a body schema. It has to understand how its body works before it can start to think about what it can and can't do in the real world. So this robot, the robot that you see in the upper left, is currently running an evolutionary algorithm. That evolutionary algorithm is a type of AI. And this evolutionary algorithm tries out over and over again lots of different ideas. And you can see for this particular evolutionary algorithm what those ideas are. Each idea is an idea of the physical robot about how its pieces are put together. And if you watch this short video, which is on loop in the bottom right, you'll notice just towards the end of this video, the evolutionary algorithm converges on a discovery. It converges on the discovery that it's made up of 4 legs. There it is. And it's figured out that those four legs are more or less arranged around its central cube here. So this is an evolutionary algorithm running on the robot, discovering its own body. Once this robot has discovered how its body is put together, it runs a second evolutionary algorithm in which the robot tries to figure out how to move its body. It knows how its body is put together. Now it's evolving a way to move its body to fulfill the mission. And the mission in this case is a very simple mission, which is just to move from the left side of the table to the right side of the table. And in this video, it's found this particular way of moving. Now the physical robot tries out that way of moving, and you can see in the upper left that this physical robot has autonomously discovered how to fulfill its mission, how to move from the left side of the table to the right side of the table. The second part of this experiment, as you've already seen, is that the robot suffers some injury, and it now needs to re-evolve or update its understanding of itself. And you can see this physical robot doing that in the video in the upper right. This evolutionary algorithm is running again. In this evolutionary algorithm, it has hundreds of ideas about how its body parts are put together. And the survival, the evolutionary survival of those ideas is based on how well the movement of that idea, that virtual robot you see in the upper right, matches its actual experiences that it felt in the injured state. So the fitness of an idea in the robot's head is how well that understanding matches the physical robot's actual experiences. It's trying to minimize the distance or the difference between its dreams, if you like, and reality. And again, in the upper right, you can see that this robot at some point thinks that one of its legs has shrunk, but that doesn't make physical sense. So that dream or that idea dies off. And some of the more successful ideas breed and produce child ideas until eventually the robot evolves a dream that describes itself, which is that it's now a 3.5-legged robot rather than a 4-legged robot. Now that it knows that it's lost part of one leg, it dreams up a new way of walking, because the way that it walked before with 4 legs no longer works. It needs to dream up a new way to move with only 3.5 legs. And it tries out this new dream, this new idea. And in this case, that new dream is also successful. And the robot is able to autonomously recover from an injury and keep moving. You can imagine why this is of interest to NASA. They're very nervous about machines experiencing situations on planetary bodies that they were never designed for or programmed for. And under those conditions, the planetary rover needs to be able to dream up a new way of acting or a new way of fulfilling its mission despite those unexpected situations. Okay, so that's just a very brief summary of some of my past work in rigid robots. But as I mentioned, for rigid robots, the only way they can recover from unexpected situations is to change how they move. In soft robots, which are made of soft materials, soft robots are able to actually change their shape as well. They can not only change how they move, but they can change how they are. They can change their own form. So what we're going to talk about now is we're going to switch gears from talking about rigid robots to talking about soft robots. And this is a relatively recent project that my colleagues and I reported in the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, or PNAS, just last year. This is a collaboration between my former students, David Matthews and Sam Kriegman, who are now both at Northwestern University here in the US, and our colleagues at MIT, Andy Spielberg and Daniela Roos. So like I just did, I'm now going to walk you through an example of evolving soft robots. One of the challenges with using evolutionary algorithms, this particular type of AI that is like trial and error, like biological evolution, evolutionary algorithms try out millions and billions of different ways of doing things. The problem with that is it's very, very slow. In the previous experiment that I was just talking about with rigid robots, that rigid robot required hours and hours and hours to dream up a new way of moving after injury. So in this soft robotics project, which is about soft robotics, it's also about the way we design these robots. So what I'm going to walk you through now is not an evolutionary algorithm, but a different type of AI, which is able to not do random trial and error. It actually removes the randomness from its search for a good robot. And it's able to actually identify for any given robot, like this robot you see here, it's able to identify where in the body or where in the brain of this robot problems are occurring. In this experiment, like the previous experiment, we want this robot to move as quickly as possible from the left to the right. And as you can see, it's doing a terrible job of moving from the left to the right. There are ways that the AI could change the body and the brain of this robot to make it move faster to the right. This new type of AI is able to identify exactly where those problems are. So before I talk about that AI, let's talk about this particular robot a little bit. You can see it's kind of an odd robot. We've punched some holes into the robot, and it's also got some small patches of red. The red are muscle patches. So you can think of this soft robot as made up of a bunch of soft material, and wherever there is red, there is a hollow part inside that robot, and those hollow red parts can be filled with air and expand a little bit, or we can pull air out of those hollow red cavities inside the robot and make those red patches inside the robot a little bit smaller. So it's a little difficult to see in the video in the upper right. You're going to see a better example of this in a moment. But if you look very carefully, you might notice that these red patches are getting a little bit smaller, remove air, or these patches get a little bit bigger. We push some air into those hollow red patches. So as the video says, we're starting with a random robot, and we want this AI to identify where there are problems in the body and brain of this robot to make it a little bit better. So in this next video, you're going to see the AI make a small change to the robot. Now this is going to play a couple times, so you'll see this. You're going to see the AI change the position of these holes and change the size of these holes a little bit. And you'll notice that the red patches have also moved a little bit. This is not a random change. For every single one of these holes and for every single one of these little bits of red patch, the AI knows exactly how to change them. And you can see the proof that that change was successful because this second robot in the upper right moves a little bit faster than the robot, the first robot. This is us exploiting some of the recent innovations in the AI revolution. The AI revolution is mostly being driven by exactly this, by designing AI that can identify where a problem is, either where a problem is in Sora or ChatGPT and making Sora a little bit better or making ChatGPT a little bit better. In this case, that same kind of AI is identifying where the problem is in the robot, modifying things a little bit non-randomly to make the robot better. Let's continue this process. Clearly this robot is still not perfect. So the AI, again, in robot number 2, identifies what's wrong with robot number 2 and makes small changes to it to produce this third robot, which does a little bit better than 2. You'll notice there's a counter in the center of this video. It's counting off in seconds. So the actual length of time that this experiment takes, or this is how long the AI takes, at this point has only been about 15 seconds. This AI is very, very, very fast. So let's continue this process. The robot again makes a change. And you can see here, it's making yet another change. It's identified another problem in the robot. And if we repeat this process 10 times, the AI eventually moves all of the holes and all of the red patches, which are the muscle, so that you get robot number 10. And as you can see in the counter in the center, it took the AI only 30 seconds to come up with this design. And you'll notice there's a couple of interesting things about robot number 10 here. We started with this random block of Swiss cheese that's got a bunch of random holes in it, and we end up 30 seconds later with a legged robot. You'll notice it's got sort of 3 legs in this case. The legs are designed to be diagonal, which allows the robot to push down and back, which causes the robot to move up a little bit, to hop up and move a little bit to the right. You'll notice that the AI has also discovered how to pattern or place the red muscle of the robot along the front or the anterior edge of each of the 3 legs. This, in retrospect, is a pretty good way to design this robot. It's not the fastest moving robot, but it's not bad. We then took this 10th robot and built it out of a soft silicone rubber that you can see now. And you'll notice there's a little tube sticking out of the top of the robot. This is us injecting air into the robot and then evacuating or pulling air out of the robot. And although you can't see it in the physical robot, there are hollow chambers inside this robot, exactly where those red patches are in the 10th simulated robot. And that distribution of air pressure into the robot causes it to deform in the way that it did in simulation. And we have an autonomously designed robot. As I mentioned, I've been working on evolutionary robotics for about 25 years, using an evolutionary algorithm that does random trial and error to try and discover a good robot. Those evolutionary algorithms take hours or days or weeks to run on a supercomputer. With this paper, we've sort of removed this random aspect of evolution, and we can now automatically design a robot in about 30 seconds. On a laptop. So for us, this was a huge, huge deal. If we can now design robots quickly on a laptop, that means we can democratize robot design. Anyone with a laptop can download the software that I'm showing you here, run this on their local machine. And in a few years' time, when we have 3D printers that can print with silicone rubber, if you have access to such a 3D printer, you could automatically design your own robot and then automatically manufacture it with a 3D printer. So I think this could very much recapitulate what happened in the 1980s with computers. Before 1980s, computers were huge, complex machines that only a few people had access to. And starting in the 1980s, more and more people were able to actually purchase and play around with computers. And that ushered in the computer revolution of the 90s and the internet revolution of the 2000s, and ultimately the AI revolution of the 2010s. So if we can get more robots into the hands of more people using AI and technologies like this, I think this will help to bring us closer to this reality of robots everywhere outside helping us to do various tasks. Okay. Just a little bit more about this soft robotics project. You just saw our soft robot doing admittedly a relatively simple thing, which is just to move from the left side of the table to the right side of the table. We did some more experiments to show you could get a robot to, for example, bounce a ball up and down, as you see in panel E here. Here's a robot that's designed to capture an object. So this is sort of the rudiments or the beginning of object manipulation, holding an object and carrying it. Just for fun, we designed a robot to throw a robot as far as possible. I don't think this robot is actually throwing the object, but you get the idea. And then just for fun, we also started, instead of with random rectangles, we started with triangles and other shapes to see what this AI would come up with. Okay, so I want to spend a few minutes now talking about biological robots. We talked about rigid robots. We just talked about soft robotics. And along the way, the robotics community as a whole has been discovering that we can make robots with more and more different kinds of materials. In the 20th century, we typically used metals and ceramics and plastics and batteries and sensors and motors, but those rigid robots are limited. They can only change the way that they move. They can't change their own shape. We just talked about soft robots, which are able to change their own shape. And those soft robots are made from a wider range of materials. I just showed you a soft robot made from silicone rubber. Josie, who's here, might tell you a little bit about the work she's doing in the soft robotics space. Soft roboticists are able to make robots from more and more different materials. So a few years ago, my lab teamed up with Michael Levin and Doug Blackiston, two biologists at Tufts University. And Michael Levin's lab is very, very talented at building things from biological materials. So when we got together, we figured out a way to actually build robots from biological components rather than technological components. And that gave birth to the xenobots, which I'm going to talk about now. You're looking at an AI-designed xenobot, or an AI-designed biological robot, on the right side of the screen here. We published our first paper about xenobots in January 2020. And as you can imagine, if you make very, very small robots out of biological materials, we got a lot of interest from the global press at that time, a lot of coverage about our work on xenobots, until 2 months later, until March 2020, and another very small creature showed up that stole the limelight away from our xenobots, and people focused for the next 2 or 3 years on another very small creature. Anyways, let's talk about xenobots today. Just to give you a sense for what you're looking at, xenobots are very, very small. They're about 1 millimeter across. So you can see Sam here holding up a biological slide, and captured underneath that glass right here is a xenobot. Hopefully most of you can see this on your screen. These are tiny millimeter-sized robots. What are they made from? I mentioned they're made from biological materials. What biological materials are they made from? They're made from frog cells. And xenobots are made from a particular type of frog. It's called, in Latin, Xenopus laevis. So we took the xeno from xenopus, and we put xeno together with robot or bot to get xenobot. In this very first experiment, our biology colleague, Doug Blackiston, told us that he was able to extract from very early frog embryo, basically a frog egg, he was able to extract 2 cell types: frog skin cells and frog heart cells. Frog heart cells, like human heart cells, are cells that when you put together, they contract and expand in volume, not unlike the soft robot that I just showed you. The red patches in the soft robot I just showed you, very much like heart tissue or muscle tissue that expands or contracts. And that muscle can be used to obviously deform the body of an organism, or in the case of the heart, all of those heart muscle cells get together and contract together to pump blood out of the heart, or all of those heart cells expand together to pull blood into the heart. So what you're going to see in a moment is the AI learning how to use the frog heart cells as motors. The AI is going to figure out how to combine these little pieces that expand and contract in volume together with these other pieces, which are frog skin cells. These pieces are soft and passive. They get pulled and pushed by the soft, active heart muscle cells. Okay, so here we go. Our biologist colleague told us, or told the AI actually, that there are two building blocks. The AI can put together these two types of cells in different combinations to make different shapes. So we're looking now at the AI, and we're back to an evolutionary algorithm. So this evolutionary algorithm is running on our supercomputer. And at the beginning of this experiment, the AI is putting together simulated heart skin cells, the blue boxes, together with frog heart cells, which are the red-green voxels or cubes. You can see 3 of the evolutionary algorithm's initial random guesses. This first guess in the upper right, the AI has just by chance put mostly frog skin cells together, the blue stuff, and you can see that the blue stuff is being pulled and pushed by the red-green cubes. When the cubes are red, those cubes are getting a little smaller, and when the cubes are green, they're getting a little bit bigger. You can see those red-green cubes pulling and pushing on the blue cubes. The task that we've asked the evolutionary algorithm to solve, as always, is figure out how to put these two types of building blocks together to make a robot that moves from the left to the right as quickly as possible. You can see that this particular xenobot in the upper right is not doing a very good job at moving from the left to the right. Its second initial random guess, it comes up with another random guess. In this case, that xenobot is just a big ball of muscle, of heart muscle cells. Despite the fact that it can move a lot, it doesn't move to the right at all also. The third one in the bottom right, although it's really hard to see in this video, you'll have to trust me, this particular bot moves 1/10 of a millimeter to the right. So even though it's a random guess, this third random guess does a little bit better than the other 2 guesses. And this is what an evolutionary algorithm needs in order to work well. One individual in the population, in this case, we're just looking at a population of 3, that one individual does a little bit better than the others. So what the evolutionary algorithm does at this point inside the supercomputer is delete the first and the second random guess. The third random guess has survived. The evolutionary algorithm takes that third random guess, that robot in the bottom right, it makes a copy of it. And when it makes a copy of that surviving robot, it introduces some small random mistakes. It adds or removes a blue cube, or it adds or removes a couple of red-green cubes. So now we have a new child robot that looks very similar to the robot in the bottom right, but it's also a little bit different. Not unlike actual children and parents, the child resembles its parents, but it's not identical. That same robot in the bottom right makes a second child to replace the robot in the upper right. It's producing 2 children. So now in the population, we have 3 robots. We have the parent in the bottom right, and we have 2 children in the upper right and middle right that look and act similarly to the parent. And because those children suffered a small random change, most of the time those children move more slowly than the parent. Those children are also deleted, and the parent is given an opportunity to make another child. But sometimes those small random changes, those small mutations, allow that new child xenobot to move a little bit further to the right than even its parent did. That child survives, the parent dies away, that child is in turn allowed to produce some children, and around and around and around you go. That's an evolutionary algorithm. So what I'm showing you on this slide is just the AI's initial 3 guesses. That random trial and error process went on our supercomputer here in Vermont for about 2 weeks. Took a lot of computational effort for the AI to figure out how to put these 2 pieces together. And eventually the evolutionary algorithm discovered this particular solution. It discovered this particular xenobot, which, as you can see, is able to move from the left to the right. Again, it doesn't move very quickly, but it's successful. One other detail I want to point out about this particular discovery of the evolutionary algorithm is you'll notice that the red and green flashing of the cubes is not synchronized. Remember that green means the cube is getting bigger and red means that the cube is getting smaller. Usually, heart cells, when they arrange into a frog heart, or when human heart cells arrange into a human heart, those heart cells communicate with one another and agree to all decrease in volume at the same time and all increase in volume at the same time. They figure out how to synchronize. When we were starting this project, we asked our biology colleague, Doug Blackiston, what will happen if the AI rearranges heart tissue? Will the cells figure out how to synchronize or not? And Doug said, I don't know. No one's really kind of done this before. So we told the AI to be conservative, to assume that these cells will not synchronize. This is one of the reasons why this becomes a really difficult design problem for the AI, for the evolutionary algorithm. It's trying to build a reliable machine, a machine that walks from the left to the right, but it has to build that machine out of unreliable parts. All of these individual bits of heart tissue do not work together. This would be like trying to build a boat where you want that boat to move through the water as quickly and as straight as possible. But the rowers, the human rowers that you put into the boat, they're not going to agree. They're not going to synchronize. They're all going to do their own thing. It's a very, very difficult engineering task. But this is why AI is so powerful and so interesting to so many people. Sometimes AI can do things that are beyond the ability of humans. And this is one example of this. Our biology colleagues have not yet figured out a way to combine frog skin and frog heart tissue in a better combination to make a xenobot that moves faster than the one that you see here that the AI dreamed up. I know I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to finish our discussion about xenobots shortly. This is just the first part of the experiment. This is the AI part of the experiment. The AI has dreamed up or evolved this design. We took this design, we took this actual video, this MP4, and we emailed it to Doug Blackiston, our biology colleague, and we challenged him to actually build this AI designed robot. Doug is an extremely talented microsurgeon. So we're looking in this video, we're looking down through the microscope with Doug. Remember that I told you these xenobots are about 1 millimeter across. So we're at a pretty extreme magnification here, so magnified that you can actually see the individual frog cells here. So what Doug has done at this point in the experiment is to extract or pull off some skin cells and some heart cells from very early frog embryo, basically a frog egg. And he's deposited with a very small syringe, he's deposited these cells into a very small hole or a little small depression in the bottom of a petri dish. So that black circle that you see, that we're looking down into that hole, and we can see that these skin cells are kind of moving and settling into the bottom of this hole. At this point in the construction process, Doug has just placed a little bit of skin cells. He then deposits another layer of heart cells on top, another layer of heart, layer of skin, skin, heart, and he's trying to place these layers down according to this blueprint. So actually, strictly speaking, he puts down a little bit of frog heart cells, then a little bit more frog heart cells, then a little bit more frog heart cells, then a layer of skin, and so on. So almost like making a sandwich. Once he's done that, all of these skin and heart cells, they're adhesive. They're a little bit sticky, so they tend to stick to one another, and you get a clump of cells like you see here. And you notice that now it's basically like a mass of material. And now Doug is again watching our MP4 video. And with very, very small microsurgical devices, remember that what you're looking at is about 1 millimeter across. He's gradually scraping away some of the unwanted material. So Doug is basically acting like a sculptor at this case. As I mentioned, Doug is a world-renowned microsurgeon. He has very, very steady hands. I want you to imagine how hard this task is by imagining a poppy seed, a little seed that's about 1 millimeter across, and you have to scrape away some of the unwanted material from that single poppy seed to make this design. That's what Doug is doing. Not many people in the world can pull this off. Finally, when Doug is finished, he takes his sculpted Xenobot that he built according to the AI's blueprint and put it right side up. And again, in the bottom half of this video now, we're looking at this robot from above. And you'll notice that although the physical Xenobot doesn't quite look like the simulated Xenobot, there's some differences between sim on the top and real on the bottom. They look more or less the same. And you'll notice that they also move more or less the same. They kind of waddle or shuffle back and forth to move themselves from the left to the right. So there's some slight differences between sim to real. This is a big challenge in robotics, but at least in this first relatively simple experiment, we were able to achieve two goals. We were able to create an AI that can design biological robots by learning how to combine biological tissues together. After the first success, this AI designed Xenobot, we were able to achieve a second success, or at least Doug was able to achieve a second success, which is to successfully manufacture a Xenobot. So at the moment in this new kind of technology, this technology of biological robots, we've automated the design of these Xenobots with AI in the top, but manufacture is still manual. We still need a microsurgeon to build these biological machines. We're continuing on with our research on Xenobots, where we are now trying to also automate the manufacture of Xenobots. If we can, like we saw at the beginning of this lecture, where we talked about Henry Ford and the systematization of manufacture indoors, if we can automatically design and automatically manufacture biobots or biological robots, that would bring down the cost of deploying these small machines, and we could, in theory, in the years to come, be able to deploy very, very large numbers of small robots made from biological components rather than technological components. I think I'm short on time, so I'm just going to show you a couple more examples. Here's an example
So
of us.
Josh, you still
Yes.
have about 10 minutes because
10
I
minutes.
use your time. Okay.
Oh, okay, 10 minutes. Got it. Okay. So with my remaining 10 minutes, let me talk a little bit more about these biological robots. In the first experiment, we started by tasking the AI with designing them to move as quickly as possible. We were wondering whether we could design these little Xenobots to also manipulate objects. So in the video you see in the top of the video, we asked the evolutionary algorithm to design a robot that could push this little yellow cube as far as possible. And you can see it's doing a pretty good job at that. The Xenobot that you see in the bottom is not quite doing what we wanted it to do. But you'll notice that this little Xenobot sort of hits this very small particle. You'll see it hit this particle in a moment. And then it starts to circle around this particle. The probability that this Xenobot would move in this way and that it actually is blind, it can't see or it can't sense this particle, that probability is very, very low. So it's not certain yet, but it seems likely that this xenobot is able to see or sense this small object it's in its environment. Remember that I told you that we made these xenobots from skin cells and heart cells. So there's no frog eyes in here, there's no frog ears, but every single biological cell, regardless of whether it's a frog cell or a human cell or a plant cell, each individual cell is covered on its surface with lots of different receptors, lots of little ways for that cell to sense its environment. And the cell itself can deform its three-dimensional shape based on what it senses. What that means is that an individual biological cell, which has lots of sensors and lots of ways of moving, is itself a tiny robot. So what you're looking at is a biological robot, the xenobot, that's made of about 2,000 cells. So that this biobot is made of about 2,000 biological robots. The xenobot that you see in the bottom is probably sensing and responding to that small object, even though we didn't directly design or put sensors or motors into that robot. So for roboticists, this is a completely different way of thinking about making machines. When we make traditional robots out of metal or silicone rubber, we have to put in sensors and motors and batteries and control and all the rest. But in this space, when we ask an AI to design biological robots for us, that AI is building machines made of machines, made of machines, made of machines, all the way down. And that completely, in my opinion, that completely changes the game in robotics. Part of the reason why we as humans and why every other organism can successfully discover or detect that things have changed in its environment and adapt is because somewhere in our hierarchy, even if we as the overall organism are surprised, maybe we slip on some ice and we start to fall, some part of our body, some organ or some muscle group or some set of cells, somewhere inside there, that hierarchy of machines, inside of machines, inside of machines, puts up its hand and says, I know what to do. And it starts doing what it knows it should do to allow us to recover quickly and keep ourselves from slipping on the ice. We are very robust and resilient to all the changes the world throws at us because we are intelligent machines, made of intelligent machines, made of intelligent machines. All of the current robots that we make, like drones and autonomous cars, they are not machines made of machines. They're a machine. If an autonomous car is surprised by some new situation, that autonomous car starts to slip on the ice and it doesn't know what to do, that autonomous car is out of luck. The individual wheels don't know what to do. The little bits of rubber that make up the wheel also don't know what to do. An autonomous car is a smart machine made of dumb materials, made of dumb materials, made of dumb materials. There's no backup plan if the machine is overwhelmed. So I wanted to sort of start to wrap up this lecture by pulling back from all of the technical details I've shown you to help you start to think about differently, about the future of robotics. Can we go about making smart machines or asking AI to make smart machines for us in a completely different way? Just for fun, as we're finishing up here, here's an example of a swarm of xenobots. In this case, we've asked them to clean up this environment. So what are the applications for xenobots? It's a brand new technology, nobody knows. But my hope is maybe someday we could release them into waterways and they'd be able to find and extract microplastics from polluted waterways, or burrow through the soil and start to pull out pollutants and poisons from the soil and maybe help us start to do some environmental remediation. So I see Alice, so I know I'm out of time. I'm going to skip ahead to my acknowledgement slide. I had some other material to show you, but I don't have time for that. So let me just finish up by thanking all of my students on the left who did all the actual work that I showed you today, in particular Sam Kriegman and David Matthews, who worked on the Xenobots project. And I'd like to thank my Yale colleagues, Rebecca and Corey and Mark, who helped out with all the work on the soft robotics side, and Doug Blackiston and Mike Levin, my biology colleagues at Tufts, who did all the important work with Xenobots. So with that, I will stop sharing my slides. Thanks for your attention, and happy to discuss with the panelists.
Okay, great. Sorry about I, try to turn on my camera a little bit early. Actually, we couldn't wait, for this fantastic talk for the discussions. It's really like give us open a new doors, like use real biomaterials to make something, they really don't even looks like robots, right? Yeah. So, thank you so much for your wonderful talk. So let me first introduce our panelists. Okay, then we got the panel. I see everyone here. First is Ted. So Ted was from Arizona State University. Now it should be 6 o'clock or something. Wake up totally. Yeah. So Ted was very active in Arizona. I saw his CV and bio for really touch several words. The research was interdisciplinary. So we're looking forward to Ted for wonderful questions and comments. And we have Joyce. So last year we met in EPFL. So I think this year she already, have a 16 people's group. Really looking forward to get, some good news and comments from you. And we have Antonio. Antonio was from Imperial College in London, and he has, a lot of works for the AI, algorithm and all these kind of things. So we're looking forward, Anthony, to, get questions and comments. The last panelist is Hui Chao Zhao. Hui Chan, sorry, yeah, Hui Chan. So Hui Chan is a famous young scientist in China, and she won a lot of awards. Also did wonderful work for the soft robots. So welcome everyone. I think we got to the panel. We got everyone here. And questions from who? Okay, I always think lady first. Okay, Josie, please.
Thank you, Josh, as usual, for a really inspiring talk. Lots to think about and lots to discuss, which is really exciting. I'm really interested about your vision for these future of these kind of evolving bio-inspired robots. Do you think that cyborgs are the future, or are they more a template for how we can evolve life? Where do you see this going in 10, 20, 30 years?
I will answer that question, and then I'll also repeat it back to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. I've spoken a lot today, so I'll just be brief. I think the short answer is yes, absolutely, that biological materials have a lot of advantages, but also disadvantages. Biological materials are good at some things, like being adaptive and flexible, like we just talked about, but also in many ways not necessarily as strong as artificial materials. So I think in the years to come, first of all, we have to figure out how to combine these materials. Biological and technological components tend not to interface very well together. If we can solve some of those problems, then we can move on to the interesting intellectual questions about what combinations of technology and biology make sense for different applications. But I would love to hear your thoughts on exactly the same question, please.
I completely agree with you. I think the interface between the two is really interesting. So for example, we're looking at plant-inspired robots. We're even working with biological plants, and the speed of growth is so slow compared to, for example, growing robots. But the capabilities they have for self-healing, for distributed sensing are just so phenomenal. So I think this ability to how can we combine the best of mechanical, physical intelligence between biological systems and more kind of hardcore kind of robotic technologies is really exciting. I think this interface question is definitely going to underlie where we're going in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
But
Maybe we move to next. Yeah, Hui Zi, Hui Chan. Yeah, female scientist first.
Hi, Josh. It's really a very impressive talk. So what impressed me most is that I know some work from you of the evolutional robotics, but I'm really impressed by that you made these evolutional robotics from even not only engineering materials, but also from biological materials. So actually, I have two questions to ask you and hopefully discuss with you. The first one is, artificial intelligence is growing very rapidly, but simultaneously, I felt that the hardware development of robotics is not that fast and rapid. For example, robotics has been developed for about 70 years. The most popular robots that we see in our industry and life, which is a robotic arm, is not that different from the one that is developed about 70 years ago. So what's your thought about the relatively slow development of the hardware of robotics compared with the intelligent part of robotics? This is the first question. And I think I can ask the second one
Sure.
together. I just want to know, what do you think the ultimate morphology of robots will be like 100 years later or even longer times? Thank you.
Great question. So, in terms of your first question, I think, hardware, as always, is sort of the biggest challenge in robotics, the hardest problem. And this is what I'm most excited about in terms of soft robotics. This is definitely not my area of expertise, but in soft robotics, we have more and more colleagues from materials science and chemistry and all sorts of colleagues that are able to develop more and more exotic materials. I think that's a big deal. And then also the automation. I mentioned 3D printers. My colleague Hod Lipson has really done a lot of innovation there. If we want to create, bespoke robots, every robot that has a unique body plan, like we find in nature, we're going to have to automate the manufacture of robots. And that's still, quite a few years off, but I think that's a big challenge. In answer to your second question, what's the ultimate morphology in 100 years' time? I have absolutely no idea. And that's maybe the reason why I love robotics the most. I don't think anyone knows. And I would bet that whatever it is, it's going to be something that none of us can imagine right now.
Exactly.
I would just like to ask you a question. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your work and what are you doing in the space of robotics or AI?
Actually, Josh, I graduated from Cornell University to get my PhD degree, and then I went to Professor Rob Wood group to did my postdoc. I came back to China about 6 years ago, so I'm actually applying for my tenure this year. So one of my areas that I put a lot of time on is artificial muscles. Actually, so I'm very amazed by that you use the heart cells to build a robot, because we are also making some artificial heart that are simulating the functions of a heart. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to increasing the power density and energy density of those engineering materials so that they can replicate the function and performance of our biological systems. And some other research areas that I work on, like stretchable sensors that we can make artificial skins for the robots to get more intelligence. Basically, soft sensors and actuators.
Very exciting. I look forward to seeing what your group comes up with in the years to come. And good luck with tenure. It sounds like you're not going to have.
Yes, Josh, remember, I invited you, come to China this time. Yeah. So PKU and Tsinghua, you are neighborhood. So you cover
welcome.
all.
You're very welcome.
I'm very tempted. Thank you.
Okay. So how about the boys? Ted, Antonio, who'll go first?
I can go if that's all right. So Josh, great talk as always, as usual. And there's two things kind of sprung up to me, just trying to tie the back end of your talk to the front end of your talk, and to sort of think about kind of the real-time problem solving of these kind of robots of the future, as opposed to sort of designing a plan and then implementing it, saying, well, how do then they kind of adapt? And so two sort of things kind of occurred to me. For one, it seemed like in your first example with sort of the artificial sea star, there was not only did you have to come up with an intelligent way for this sea star to sort of come up with a new body plan and use it, but you also that kind of took for granted that you had a lot of sort of evolvability or flexibility in the underlying mechanical structure. If it were instead like a four-wheeled automobile and you lost a tire, you might have just been stuck in the water. Like there aren't a whole lot of strategies that could get you that way. So I guess the one thing that question I have is do you think we as robotic designers of subcomponents need to be thinking about injecting, like you said, machines of machines, turtles all the way down into the subcomponents? Do we need to be sort of adding adjacent possibilities, adding evolvability that is sort of unrealized in our sort of core design, but then allows us allows the machine flexibility to adapt in novel ways later? And do you have any sort of help for how we can do that? That was my first question. Then the second question is kind of related to that. In your middle example, you talked about how in your recent PNAS paper, how you've implemented kind of these gradient-based back propagation approaches, taking them out of neural networks and put them into soft robotics so that you can sort of very quickly get almost kind of a reinforcement learning feel to the soft robotics where they can kind of modify themselves based on how well they're doing. And have you thought about, is there a way to physically embody in that kind of reinforcement learning or those that back propagation, so that could actually happen in real life, where you get these feedback circuits that just emerge naturally, and the little blob starts solving problems, as you see it. And so both those kind of relate to evolvability, I guess. So that's what I got.
Yeah, great question. So to address your first question about do we need to be thinking about subcomponents inside of components, my answer is absolutely yes. And I would say no one in the community, including our group, has really scratched the surface of this yet, with the exception of my former student, Sam Kriegman, who's now a new faculty member at Northwestern. While he was working with me, he kind of came up with this idea of fractal robots. Can you evolve a robot and then make copies of that robot and actually glue them together to make a larger robot? It was literally a fractal robot. But I thought it was a great first step to like taking this idea seriously of making machines made of machines. So we were dumbfounded at the time when we went to the literature and we Googled fractal robots, and there was basically nothing. Like, it just was amazing that somehow this concept, unless it's known under another name, I think there's so much work to be done in this space of making machines made of machines made of machines. To address your second question about could we actually embody or make physical robots in which the materials themselves detect errors, or they know they're being inefficient and propagate back those inefficiencies or errors to identify and fix the problem physically? I think yes. I have absolutely no idea how to do it. I know Hui Chen here, who works on actual materials. This would be really amazing. Intelligent materials that can back propagate error. Just to add to your question, a lot of this work has made us think about maybe this is what cells are doing as well. There's a lot of excitement in neuroscience at the moment about whether the brain back propagates error. I think we can generalize that question to, does the body back propagate error? And I'm not a biologist, but what I've learned from working with biologists over the years is that the answer is always yes, probably, but we haven't found it yet. Ted, could you tell us a little bit about what you're working on or what you're interested in these days?
Sure. So my background's sort of in control theory, but combined with behavioral ecology. So I have a wet lab, but we're not building soft robots. We're experimenting with, we actually have ants in the lab. We work with slime mold. We work with, biological organisms. We also do field work. And so we're very interested in kind of collective intelligence. And so half of my lab are biologists who are out, in Australia or in Panama or in the lab, trying to give ant colonies difficult problems and then see how they solve it. And the other half of my lab is then working on building new neural networks and new robotic control structures that mimic those things and come up with ways to see if we can import and kind of insights from those things. And so we're always kind of looking to ways to straddle the kind of biology and the in the engineered world. And I would mention, just in response to what you just said about, back propagating error, there's this sort of classical system in neuroscience of efference copy and reafferent feedback, which is a little bit like kind of a Kalman filter in control theory, where your mind actually does have a model of what it thinks should happen, and your brain will send a copy of the signals it sends to its muscles into that model. And if the proprioception you feel doesn't match up, then it will update those signals in that sort of way. And so this idea of reafference is sort of been very well known. And so it'd be really cool to see that built into some of these soft robots someday.
Agreed. Thank you, Ted.
So, Antonio, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, George, for this fantastic talk. I still remember when I started my PhD, my supervisor handed me your book. I remember reading it everywhere because I cannot wait to read the next page. I definitely remember reading your book at the hairdresser because I really needed to go through everything. And yet today again, it's very, very inspiring to see all your work over the last couple of years. Actually, I love your idea of machines built out of machines and so on. And I'm quite curious about the very last experiment you showed, where you have this xenobot that is actually changing its behavior when approaching this new cell, and that your intuition that it's actually perceiving something. But it's also quite interesting that you actually built this xenobot from the blueprint from artificial evolution, and I believe that your understanding of the machine, also the building blocks that you will be eventually using to build the xenobot, was quite limited or uncertain. You did not anticipate this. So my question is, how do you see, how we can resolve this dissonance of this issue between your artificial model of your xenobots and the actual machine that you use to build those robots? How do you combine this kind of conflicting words? So do we need to invest in creating better understanding of those sub-machines, or do we need to build and invest into more open-ended artificial evolutions that can actually handle a lot of unknown elements and just combine this? Or do you think that we need actually to loop artificial evolution and real world experimentation and evaluation? So that's my first question, sorry. The second one is, naturally, in the same way that the body shapes the way we think, the optimal body may depend on the tasks that we want to achieve. So for instance, in the one of the video you showed, you can quickly emerge kind of diagonal legs because your goal is to move to the right as fast as possible. But this, so you have a clear dependency between the task and the morphology. But if we want to achieve your goal, which is mine as well, to have robots in very unstructured environment, like on an oil rig, or also in my home, or in my kitchen, or in my garden, or on a different plant, or even on a different planet. What would be the learning or the evolution process to obtain this kind of general purpose morphology, or that would be able to help in a lot of different tasks?
Great questions. Thanks, Antoine. So back to your first question about, if I can paraphrase it, there's so much that we don't know about biology. There's so much that those individual cells in the xenobot are doing that we have no idea. Not only do we not know what they're doing, but we clearly can't control them. And that's, particularly scary in AI and robotics. We're all learning, all of us are learning what happens when when you can't guarantee the behavior of ChatGPT or Sora. And that uncertainty grows, when you're dealing with robots and dealing with biological robots. How are we going to handle that? It's a great question. I don't have a good answer. It's a big open problem. I will say that, I was inspired by your own work that was published in a very high profile journal a few years after our paper in Science. And so for those that are participating or listening in, I would encourage you to Google Antoine's name and read about his work in more detail. I'm going to summarize it if I can. One of the things that I was inspired about is you designed a robot that was able, or the AI was able to very quickly converge on uncertainty. The AI learned within a few seconds' time about what aspect of the robot and how it interacted with the environment that it was unsure about, and sort of drilled in and got more data, more information from the physical machine around that point of uncertainty. And so one of the things we're doing is adapting your approach to, for biological machines is, can we do the same thing? There's so much uncertainty in biology in general, and in xenobots in particular, that when the physical xenobot does not do what the AI thought it was going to do, that's like waving a red flag in front of the AI. It immediately zooms in on that uncertainty. It also ties back to what Ted was just saying about afferent copies. The brain seems to be doing something similar. When there's a mismatch between what you thought was going to happen and what did happen, that immediately draws the focus and the attention of organisms and humans. Why don't we design our AI to do that? And it's not an easy thing to do. And you were very successful in finding a way to do this very quickly for technological machines. So I think we can try and do that again for biological machines. Can you remind me about your second question?
Yes, the relationship between the task we want to solve with robot and their morphology.
Yeah, so I don't... for all the roboticists on the call, you're going to probably agree with me on this one. Robotics is really hard. Making a general purpose robot in the not too distant future, I don't know. I think in the short term, it's going to be, if we're lucky, create and deploy very large numbers of very highly specialized machines. The oil rig robot, the dishwashing, cleaning up kitchen robot, the snow shoveling robot. I think that's more likely. Most of us are comfortable with computers where it seems obvious that you make a general purpose machine. Computers, even from their early days, they were general purpose machines. So it seems like that's kind of obvious for robotics as well. My view is absolutely not. We're going to create, if we're lucky, create very specialized machines and then general purpose machines. I know we're getting short on time, so I will hand the baton back to Alice.
Okay, great. Actually, all the questions are so wonderful. I have the last question. Okay, we got the chance to get so outstanding scientists from all over the world here, to talk about this hot topic. So I follow the book. Okay, so you write many years. A title is "How About the Body Shapes the Way We Think." Okay, my question for all of you, okay, is how AI will shape the way we live. Okay, how AI will shape the future, the way we live. Okay, who go first? Yeah, maybe Joyce. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of a discussion about energy here, because I think AI can really shape the way we live in terms of Josh's example, amazing results using AI, what Antoine's doing. But all this has a big, significant energy cost. In terms of computation. And if we look at human brains, they're incredibly efficient. So from a robotics perspective, I think there's something we've not quite got right here about AI. AI is an amazing tool. I think we look at ChatGPT, it's and the accessibility of AI is truly exciting. And I think that's going to change our daily lives. Is this the answer to solving the kind of problems Josh showed in terms of creating intelligence. I think it's one of the key steps for doing this kind of evolutionary algorithms. But in terms of kind of using these to develop really intelligent robots, I think we've got to have a think there. And is this the energetically the right thing to do in this kind of day of sustainability, and also kind of more bio-inspired approach to computation, and also kind of more bio-inspired machines. So I think it's a tool. I think it's going to change as humans our daily lives, and as roboticists and engineers, I think it's a powerful tool there. But I think we should think of, is this it? Is this the direction that's going to really transform this robotics landscape?
Super, yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like Josh showed that robots with the cells that don't need energy, right? Yeah, it's just automatically, to work by themselves. That's really safe way.
Yeah, exactly. Energy consciousness. There's something, large AI models, fantastic, but there's something in biology that we need to capture to make really truly intelligent machines. And I think that's why what Josh is doing is so exciting.
Yeah, it is. So, Pat, how about you? Okay, what's in your mind? Yeah.
Well, sort of pivoting off of that, I mean, so Josh has mentioned that a lot of these methods can be used to build these sort of bespoke robots, and I think that for decades, engineers have been focusing on the general purpose, on making robots that are robust to a wide variety of different challenges, and just have to be sort of the perfect robot, and that makes them big and bulky and monolithic and use a lot of energy and those sorts of things. And I think that the promise of this exploration that the methods that like Josh is using can do, combined with the sort of democratization of soft robotics and so on, the potential of that is maybe we'll start being able to build. Like when I look across the diversity of, say, ant taxa, so there's roughly 20,000 different species of ants, and a lot of people just think that ants follow trail pheromones or something, but it turns out that there's a wide range of different solutions that they've come up with for the exact same problem that are all tailored to the habitat that they were sort of evolved in. And we learn about how can you gain a strength that makes use of your physical environment so that reduces the burden on what you need to build within the organism operating in that environment. And that connection to the physical is something that we largely haven't capitalized on because we just don't really have the design methods for it. And it's my hope that these kind of autonomous exploration of design methods that people like Josh are using, combined with the ability to rapidly build prototypes and test them in an environment that is unique to a specific problem, will make for more energetically friendly and simpler and sort of less bulky and less wasteful designs in the future. So that's my hope.
Wow, good. Yeah, we're looking for that too. Okay, Hui-Chan, how about you?
So AI currently is more like a tool for me because I focus more on the hardware part of robotics. So from my opinion, I think AI will only shape the world once it's combined with hardware technologies like robots. So I like Josh's talk because he combines AI and robotics in a really good way. I think there is a very popular thinking in recently that AI is doing all this creative work. They paint, they generate videos, they generate text, generate books, but we are still doing the tedious work, like we have to clean our own room and doing all the laundry. This is not what we really want. We want the opposite, actually. We want the tools to help us to do all this tedious and repetitive work, and we do the good things. So I think AI still have a long way to go to really shape our life dramatically. That's my opinion.
Okay, good. Okay, so Antonio?
Yeah, actually, I kind of agree with everything that's been said so far. And I think AI would be a fantastic tool to actually cross the gap between this kind of generalist answers or generalist machine or generalist tools into something that is way more bespoke, tailored, and personalized to every single needs. With AI now, we can actually try to optimize directly the shape and the morphology and the behavior of robot to a given task. But we can also transpose the same concept to other type of problems. Like now, we can also also imagine to have vaccines that is not only specialized to a specific disease, but even to a specific part of the population. And maybe at some point we will have the vaccines that are specific to every single human being, because we can use AI to generalize and produce new tools for us, or new product for us. And I believe that this will boom in every single dimensions of engineering and medicines and even arts and creation, because you can also imagine to have very bespoke and tailored and personalized behavior for human robot interaction. You can have specialized new materials for a given task. You can have new specialized arts, like movies or video games for every single needs or every single preferences of each everybody in the planet.
Yes, we have a super tools, right? Yeah, we can enhance ourselves. Yeah. So how about Josh? If after 18 years you write another book?
Well,
Yeah.
here's hoping. I would just, I agree. I would agree with all my colleagues. I think, AI is a revolutionary technology because it's going to revolutionize every technology. That more or less what Anton was just saying. We have no idea, the way we think about technology now is gonna be completely discarded. AI is going to revolutionize the way that we make everything, from cars to vaccines to art. That's the revolution. It's kind of started, but it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, super. Yeah, I like the discussions, that's panels, because everyone, brainstorming here, especially for this hot topic. So yeah, thank you all of you.